Betsy and Thomas here for the American Intelligence Media. So I was going through, YouTube videos and things. I have to scroll through a lot in order to come up with an exquisite cat report each day. And I was watching a video put out by BPEarthWatch, who does excellent videos on weather. And then the one I saw, I wanted to post, but I really felt that it needed to have an explanation. So I asked Thomas if he'd write me a line or two because he knows the subject area very well. And he said that actually he could talk a lot about it. So I said, well, here, let's set up the microphone. Now, in the description box, you will see the short video. It's about 6 to 8 minutes. It is a major solar event that occurred today at somewhere around 11 o'clock for about 30 minutes, and today is June 29th, 2019. Thomas, after people watch it, what are they going to be concerned about?
Well, it looks as if the sun flatlined for a minute, according to the charts that BPEarthWatch shows in this. They get those charts from the same place I watch solar activity, and it's a solar weather station, and you also notice that they sell, they're like preppers ready for big changes, because if you're going to talk about climate, you have to talk about the sun or else you're an idiot. So all the people who want to talk about climate change, you don't say climate change and solar studies, they're stupid. I'm sorry, I always use that word when I come back to this, but I mean, they are so stupid that it is unimaginable that any scientist would speak about CO2 as the way that climate
Thomas,
changes.
You just said the sun blinked out. What do you mean by that?
Well, first off, we are in a Maunder cycle of a solar minimum that is about as minimum as we've ever seen in history.
And when you say a time, what kind of time period are we talking about? Days, months, a year? What is this Maunder cycle?
It varies a bit, but it's over 240 years, and it has a periodicity based upon the solar minimums and the solar maximums. A solar minimum is when there's no sunspots and solar flares, that we can see those, okay? We can see them with our eyes. But I'm going to have to explain some very complicated stuff here. I'm so glad that you asked, though, because this is a subject I love to study, and no one wants to talk about it. No one. I mean, it is unbelievable. Everybody goes completely blank when you speak of this or when I speak of it. But all climate on the earth is determined by the sun, because the sun affects the 9 ocean currents. And those ocean currents actually spin our earth. That's why our earth spins. And the salination of them is determined by how much water there is in the ocean or in the sky at any one time. And because we are messing with creating massive amounts of clouds, fake clouds, and putting them into the sky as geoengineering, weather manipulation, we are upsetting that balance tremendously. Or when we put too many salts in the ocean, you imbalance that. But those things matter little. What matters is, are you on a solar minimum or a solar maximum? If you're on a solar minimum and there's no sunspots and there's no solar flares, then you are going to have earthquakes all along the
Pacific Rim.
Well, the Pacific Rim, the Ring of Fire, it's called. I'm trying to think of a way to explain this.
But this Maunder cycle, when did it start?
When did it start? When the last solar minimum started, which is just recently.
Yes, that's what I want people to understand. This is just something that has now occurred in recent days, and you're saying that it will unfold over 200 years, and this is a phenomenon that we might experience again, this solar event.
Well, we've been in a solar minimum for over a year, and what we see, though, I got to explain this really step by step, or people can't comprehend this, because nobody teaches anybody about the sun, even though everything on the earth that is alive has to give their thanks to the sun, because that's where the life came from, the warmth, the light, the chemistry, the interaction of valence, or what we would call also sound, and also gravity. You would call it gravity, I would call it life. So warmth, there's these elements, and all those elements come from the sun. And if you're within our atmosphere, you don't get the higher elements of the sun, plus you don't get other things that come from the sun. I'll explain in just a second. So we're in a solar minimum. So that means that the corona of the sun doesn't reach out in a solar maximum when you have lots of sunspots and lots of solar flares that often accompany them, or sometimes the solar flares just happen during the maximum cycle. Then the corona of the sun literally reaches out like arms and can extend beyond the earth. We are in the arms of the sun, and we're following behind the sun. They took all the computer simulations and all the direct physical observations that they have, put them into a computer. It spun around the data until they were able to produce the true motion of the sun and the inner planets and the outer planets. And if you haven't seen this, you should look it up, because this is the way the sun moves and the planets move. And it isn't the way that we were taught. It isn't Copernicus, it isn't Galileo, it isn't Laplace, it isn't any of those. It's none of those. It's what Rudolf Steiner said. And I'm going to tell you a bit about that now, but it's very, very complicated. So,
well, just assume that everyone has the knowledge, because
they don't have the knowledge.
Okay,
this knowledge just was created
I know,
a year
but
ago,
sometimes
2
you just
years
have
ago.
to speak it and then allow people to reach for that truth.
People understand it because
Okay.
their hearts know that it's true.
Well, then say it.
Okay, so we are in a solar minimum. We're at the end of a Maunder cycle, which means we're entering into a mini ice age. We are not entering into a climate change for heat. They now know that, so they changed it to climate change instead of climate warming. We were going to all burn up, but now that honest scientists are giving honest temperatures, and it isn't all rigged by the people who received the money from the government to say that those temperatures were actually different than they are. We actually have more ice right now than in the last 35 years at Antarctica, and the ice at the Arctic is as big as it's been for a long time. So the Northwest Passage is closed. Why is that? Because we're at a solar minimum. So you're going to get more ice at the poles. You're going to get all along the Ring of Fire. If you don't know what that is, look that up. All along the Ring of Fire, you're going to have earthquakes. You're seeing that massively. You're going to have earthquakes at the bottom of the ocean. We're seeing that, volcanoes, and lots of earthquakes. Lots and lots of earthquakes. Matter of fact, Yellowstone just had dozens and dozens of earthquakes. California, certain places have had hundreds in a row. Every volcano you know of is going off. Yes, they are. Why? Because when the sun is not, let's imagine it the old ways, zooming out its light and warmth and sound and life to us, then when it gets quiet, then the earth gets active. So the corona of the sun, when it gets small and just comes to little peaks and points, instead of long reaching out at fantastic arms of magnetism, which are solar wind, of course, is included in that. This is the exchange between the sun and the earth. You could actually literally say, and this is the way that we look at it in anthroposophy, when this happens and it's a minimum, the earth is like a sun. It's becoming a sun. And what you'll notice is fantastic aurora borealis. But you'll say, wait a second, there's no solar flares. How can there be aurora borealis? On a massive scale. Why are some of the biggest aurora borealis manifestations when there was no solar flare that accompanied it? Because of what I'll explain in a minute. The earth can become like the sun when the sun is at its minimum. When the sun is at its maximum, the earth becomes at its minimum. Now, between the minimum and maximum of the sun with its activity, you're talking about not only the rays of the sun and magnetism, but you're also talking about coronal mass ejections, which may have X-rays in them and gamma waves in them. You can't see them. So there are parts of the sun that are zooming at us that we can see and parts that you can't see. And to make it more complicated, there's a part that goes out beyond us when the sun comes at us. Part comes in our atmosphere, but parts go beyond us, and then it goes out to the realm of the Saturn, where the limit of Saturn, we could call it the realm of Saturn or the sphere of Saturn, but it's not really a sphere. And then it turns around and comes back, but it's invisible when it comes back. Now, they're going to tell you that. Anybody tell you that in school? That the solar wind, the solar breath, goes out to Saturn and then comes back. Now, when it comes back, and that's the reason that they can't figure out why they have such fantastic aurora borealis. Well, right now, with this event that BPEarthWatch has pointed out, that you asked me to look at, that cannot be explained. There's no explanation for that either. You'd call it a malfunction of the machines, but no, it's not, because you also saw in the magnetosphere of the Earth, the part that points towards the sun, we're going to talk about it in a minute, but the part that points away from the sun, like a comet tail, it's always away from the sun. The magnetopause is one name for it. Sometimes has like a backlash and lights up and gives us the biggest aurora borealis from events that we don't even know they weren't visible. They weren't coronal mass ejection. It wasn't gamma wave. What was it?
Now, we're talking about this 30-minute period of time where there's just no activity that is being detected. So you have to watch the video to see it.
Now, what I've been telling you I'm going to tell you in a minute, I'm going to tell you now. And this is where it gets Star Trek-ish. I do not make this stuff up. Please look it up yourself. But what you're going to find is when you look up these terms I'm giving you, I may give you many terms because anything that's new in science, they keep changing the name of because they don't understand it. And they don't want to admit that they don't even have an active theory for it. But the theories that have been created about what I'm about to tell you, which I keep warning you I'm about to, is so bizarre that you're just not going to believe me. But this is why we just had, and Rudolf Steiner tells about all of this, and that's the reason I know this to be true, and I've also studied it and looked at the different systems and all the different systems and all the different... What I'm about to say is so crazy that you're going to think I'm crazy. So if they can't explain this, and I can explain it through Rudolf Steiner's anthroposophy, then maybe they need to study the sun a little bit more, and then there wouldn't be any of this climate nonsense, because climate is directly, absolutely 100% directly related to the sun. So, when the magnetopause of the Earth lit up when we had this anomalous event where the sun seemed to be so quiet that it looked like it was flatlining, what was that? That's because the sun was flatlining. The sun is at such a minimum that it's become an Earth. There's no solar flares. There's no sunspots. It's quiet as can be on the surface of the sun. You can't look in it. And by the way, everything they ever told you about the sun, you better get ready because I'm going to tell you that what their new theories are. And you're not going to believe their new theories, but their new theories are actually getting close to the truth. So when there's nothing going on in the sun whatsoever, then we just saw that absolutely nothing was going on with the sun, but we get a blast behind the Earth of a fantastic display of ionized particles that lights up the aurora like crazy. We've seen this again and again and again. Well, at the same time, here's the crazy part. In space, they have noticed, and they've noticed this 4 or 5 years ago now, maybe even more, that we know about, that they told us about 4 or 5 years ago, because then they created a thing called magnetic transfer exchange points. They also call them doorways. While they're in space, they look over, and as one of these events is happening, they see a brilliant, bright light that is beyond anything they've ever seen before. They can't explain it. The sun's quiet as can be. What is going on? So then they studied them. They sent up 4 satellites, and now he describes those 4 satellites in this report. As a matter of fact, he mentions them once. Those 4 satellites are taking pictures of these magnetic transfer exchange portals, they call them, or doorways. Well, now, because they aimed all their gear and all their efforts with their solar observatories, with SOHO and the other solar observatories that they've launched to map this out, and because they have now a physical computer-generated model of the way our solar system actually moves, which is nothing like you've ever been told, it looks like DNA. The sun is moving ahead. The 3 inner planets are doing this kind of limnoscadal dance, doing their own thing, being pulled by magnetic ropes. And that's and then comes the Earth, and then comes the outer 3 planets in a bigger limnoscadal pattern, being pulled behind the sun. and the other outer planets are being pulled along with it.
Well, of course, you do discuss this topic in your book, The Eternal Ethers.
Correct, in great detail, and give you the theories and show you all the references so that you know I'm not talking off the top of my head. But the deal is, this is one of the most exciting things ever discovered in human history. Basically...
What, this event that occurred today?
No, it's proof of the event is what Rudolf Steiner says it is, which I'm trying to explain. Very complicated. But let's say, like right now, imagine a brilliant doorway opens. So they started studying it. Guess what that doorway opens to? Chords. Literally, they're going to find out, but it's 4 chords around a central 5th chord. But anyway, there's these chords of magnetism, and the Earth has one going directly to our North Pole. And we are basically being, or North and South Pole, through the magnetosphere. We're being sucked behind the sun through these points of contact between the sun and the Earth. When the sun is at a minimum and the Earth is at a maximum, we open up and we renew these magnetic cords that are connected to the sun so that we are being pulled behind it. Why? Because we're no longer within the embrace of the solar maximum of ionization and magnetism and solar wind that is literally wrapping around its arms around us. No, it's a minimum, so we have to reassert our connection. That's part of it. That's the magical part of it. The part I was telling you you're not going to believe. But look this up. Magnetic transfer flux points or portals. Now they show that there are chords, many chords. They didn't know they were there before. They know they're there now.
When you say it, you're saying chords, C-O-R-D-S.
Yes,
chords.
Like a cord of a rope,
yes.
Like a bunch of strings all pulled together into a cord. Now they see that there's a ton of them. It's not just the Van Allen belts. It's not just the magnetopause. There's these cords of magnetism that literally are ropes that are binding our Earth, pulling us behind the sun. Every planet has one, a bunch of these cords. And these cords, the only thing it looks like is what they have now shown through interactive MRI, that when you have a neural network pattern in the brain for, say, the word elephant, it's the same for everybody, no matter what language it's spoken in. That's what it looks like. It looks like a bunch of chords that make a pattern, but once it connects to the major chord, it leads through these magnetic transfer points only for the moment that it appears. And instantaneously, so it goes beyond time and space, that we have magnetic transfer flux points that are connecting to the magnetism of the sun and reasserting these magnetic cords beyond time and space, because it's instantaneous. It isn't 8 minutes. It isn't anything visual. It isn't the solar wind. It isn't magnetism. It is something beyond that. It is some kind of magnetism that we don't understand.
What I thought was so very interesting is that it occurred sometime between 11 and 11:30. The markers are there, and that is Universal Time, which is over here in America, Eastern Standard Time, so there's no difference. So around 11, and I began to visualize that this 11:11 marker that so many people see on their clock, or in other places, you see 11:11, and we know that that is a vibration, a frequency of a doorway being opened. Thomas, could we have possibly opened up a portal or a doorway today?
Absolutely. Those are the doorways we're talking about. So all those people who talk about, the super beings coming, well, they do. When the sun's arms are wrapped around us, then the super beings of the planet Vulcan, which nobody really knows exists, and Mercury and Venus and the moon literally are able to create bridges, doorways to the Earth. And that's just the way that it is. I'm sorry to have to put it in such blunt terms. Now, are there higher beings? Yes, but they don't have corporeal bodies. They don't have bodies like ours. Do they live on Venus and Vulcan and Mercury and the moon? between here and the moon, that's pretty much our realm.
A lot of people would find a comfort in seeing these beings as angels and archangels.
They are angels, archangels,
Right.
and time beings. Yes, archai. Now, there are beings beyond us, beyond the asteroid belt. So Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn have a different pattern, but they're still being pulled by these magnetic cords. And their pattern is much bigger. And that's the reason we think they're further out. But they're really not. They're right behind the Earth. So, as I said, the solar wind, but also all manifestations, many manifestations of the sun, go out to Saturn and then return and come back. And so what we're seeing is the magnetopause being lit up by what seems to be a complete pause of the sun's activities, is showing us the invisible solar wind of the sun returning to us. It's just that it's coincide through the harmonics of the fact that the sun happened to be at this complete pause, you could call it, at a complete minimum pause. So the solar minimum came to literally, I'm just extrapolating on this, a complete pause. But at the same time, the solar wind reflected from the outer planets came back and lit up our magnetopause, and that's the reason that happens. They can't figure this out. And then they're thinking, oh my, look at this. The magnetopause is lighting up. At the same time, we have minimums happening and these doorways directly opening to the sun. Are they connected? Yes, they're connected to the cycles of the sun. And if we study the cycles of the sun, it'll give us the cycles of the ice ages. It'll give us the cycles of all of our weather and our climate. In the Norse, they say it's the hag Gerti and her 8 sisters, the 9 ugly sisters, each who have a big pole that they stick into the world mill, and they spin it. And without them, the world would not spin, and there'd be no gold, salt, or meal in the ocean. Well, that may sound silly, but that's the way that it is. There are 9 ocean currents, and if the sun's activity changes either the salination or the volume of water, or we change the volume of water by our stupid attempts to occlude solar waves, that's what all the geoengineering is about, is creating clouds to reflect the sun so that the earth doesn't heat up and the CO2 kill us. This is all nonsense. We need the CO2. CO2 goes through cycles. Without it, we'd all die. We do not need to create fake clouds. That's complete
disagree.
insanity.
I think the chemtrails are from Serco, and it's the Brits trying to depopulate all of us.
That is one of the many things that it does.
But we need
Correct.
to know, Americans, we need to know what they're spraying on us and what the reason is. And we need to know if Serco is behind it, is the U.S. government behind it? Just what's up there and what are they spraying on us?
These are the genocide people that you posted that article recently on the Cat Report. It's genocide. You know, part of the particles drop on us, like you always call it, roaches. You know, drugs.
Yes, spray.
It's spray on roaches. Yes, correct. Trying to kill people, and part of it stays up there and occludes the sunlight, and basically is supposed to, by a cloud, send the rays back. You know, don't let the rays in. Don't warm up the earth. And then there's parts that just keep rising up into the atmosphere and destroy our atmospheres. And that is because of the technology, satellite technology, we're not going to get into today. But we cannot do anything without the sun. So if you change, and right now we have seen just in the last, since they have measured this, ocean currents change their directions, their temperatures, and their entire stream in a matter of months. This has never happened before. Why is this happening? So those people who say we are receiving these cosmic rays, yes, we are. We are receiving now, we know, coronal mass ejections with X-rays, gamma waves, and many other waves constantly now, especially during this minimum. And just in the last 20 years, I watch this all the time. This is frightening that a huge hole appears in the southern part of the sun, coronal mass ejection, that if it came at us from the sun, it would destroy us. This is terrifying. No one hears anything about this.
Could this be perhaps wrapped up in the prophecy of the sun blinking out, you know, for the 3 days, and that perhaps that was perhaps something that could have happened, but it didn't happen?
Yes, I think you're quite right.
Because certain spiritual forces had been prepared here on Earth to change the trajectory of what was going to happen?
I think you're quite right, and there's many reasons I think you're right, and it's funny you should bring that up. I wasn't going to bring that up. But a few years back, the sun had trouble changing its north and south pole, and they got stuck. And no one knew what was going to happen in the solar world, which is like, just a few people on the Earth. Nobody else cares about the sun. And they didn't know what was going to happen. And so everybody said, okay, this is it. The polar shift is going to happen. Everybody's been talking about. Well, the polar shift didn't happen on the Earth, but it finally did happen on the sun, and it went forward. And they lied about it, and they hid it, and blah, 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 blah. The point is that you're right. There was supposed to be a polar shift or polar adjustment. We are seeing the magnetic North Pole move faster than it's ever done in history, as far as we know, as far as we've tracked, and it's just speeding up all the time. Why? Because all of the magnetic centers of the Earth are adjusting, and these cords that they now find are entering places of the Earth. They're going, holy moly, we didn't know that there was a system of geomagnetism that makes the Van Allen belt look like, what it is, a barcode. I mean, it's a magnetic bar iron filings. No. There is one that goes through the Earth. It connects everything. Just look it up. You'll see. It's all the new science, right? But the new science, they're not going to give you good names for it. They're not going to give you an overview for it, but they will just what I always suggest, go to Google, hit images, say...
Google, let's go to DuckDuckGo. Okay?
Anywhere.
Or
go
Bing.
To any place that gives you images on the internet and put in magnetic ropes on the Earth. And you will it'll blow your mind. In other words, the thoughts, these cords that we see in our brain that light up in patterns, and the more sophisticated patterns connect all three parts of the brain. Well, when those are the same patterns happening on the Earth. In other words, thoughts are keeping the Earth together. And magnetic portals that defy time and space are connecting invisible magnetic ropes between the Earth and the sun.
And perhaps it's because of the prayers and the good thoughts of enough people, a critical mass of people, that were awakened and conscious at this period of time that we moved through it.
Yes.
And then I want you to, as you conclude, let's make sure that we're not creating unnecessary fear in people. Let's talk about what does this mean?
Oh, when the sun gets quiet, we're supposed to get loud. And so there's a lot of loud going on right now. The people have awakened from at least 100-year sleep.
Yes.
Perhaps a 200-year sleep. And they're waking up and saying, wait a second, nothing we've ever been told was true. Let's take a new look at things. Climate change? There's no climate change. There's sun change. How come not a single climate change that the government paid for report ever referred to the sun or sun cycles? Because they would show they don't align with this nonsense. So if we just simply look at the sun, get ready, folks. We've entered into a mini ice age. This has already been shown.
And this is why it's so important that we release the technologies that are available to us to create inexpensive energy, such as thorium and other technologies, because we are going to need the heat to keep us all warm during this period of time and to be able to grow our food.
From 2020, for a few years, we're going to get a cold snap like we haven't seen since the 1800s. And people ignore that one. There was a mini ice age already that overtook England and Scotland, Ireland, Wales. Well, anyway, the point is you can. All these things are easy to look up. Maunder cycle, any of these things I'm making reference to, the magnetic ropes of the Earth. The point is that, just as Betsy said, do not be scared by this. When the sun goes into a quiet like this, we are supposed to shine like a star. And so what happens? The aurora borealis gets brighter. Why? The sun's quieter. Everything they've told us is the opposite. The aurora borealis only goes off when the sun goes off. Wrong. It's the opposite. No, it's not that's true, but there's another part. The bigger auroral displays right now are because we, and what we have done as a Earth becoming a star, has been reflected by the outer planets of Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn and been given back to the sun. And so we are giving back to the sun through our aurora, both the northern and southern, as well as all the light in every human heart and all the light in every cell of our body. Phytochemical reactions are what keep us alive. We are light. So whether you like it or not, we are warmth, we are light, we are chemical reactions, we are magnetic reactions, we are life. We're the whole thing the sun is. We're a replica of the sun. What's the sun? A replica of the universe. Beyond our solar system, we don't understand anything. So anything they tell you about beyond the solar system, forget about it. That ain't happening. Now, Betsy's right. Don't get scared by this. And don't get scared by when the solar flares are going off, then they get all worried. No, that's just the sun loving us. We get to love the sun now. So we get to be a star, and you're supposed to shine. And how do you shine? By saying to your parent, the mother, the sun, thank you for showing us how to give out warmth and light and beautiful sound and life to everyone who comes near us.